thank you for the kind introduction. And as always, yeah, I was just about to say as a joke, so to get started, let's do a 1-minute meditation, but I'll spare you that. So Agile product roadmaps, that's what I'm looking forward to discussing with you in the next 45 minutes or so. I plan to talk for no longer than hopefully 35 to 40 minutes. I hope there'll be a little bit of time for questions at the end. Now, product roadmaps are a traditional product management tool, but can and should they be used in an Agile context? So those are the questions I'd like to discuss with you. But before I jump into the answers and share them with you, I'd like to briefly touch upon what are product roadmaps. And the days are getting slowly shorter. The weather is getting slowly no longer quite so nice. Temperatures dropping. And this time of year, I tend to then think about, what about a summer holiday? What about the next summer holiday? And where could we maybe spend the next summer vacation as a family? And one of the places I'm very fond of, and I had the good fortune to spend some time in, is this area here. So some of you might know it. It's the Tegernsee area, and Tegernsee is also the name of the lake that you can see here. It's a beautiful lake, I find. You can go for nice walks along its shores. They've got some really good ice cream shops. You can take the boat across the lake. That's quite enjoyable. You can go for walks in the mountains. You can also ride your bicycle in the mountains, and that picture was taken, I think, about 2 years ago when I had the opportunity to go for a bicycle ride. So yeah, lovely area. And assuming that my family and I would like to go there in the next summer, spend our holiday there, then it'd be natural for me to, use a roadmap or a mapping tool like Apple Maps or Google Maps and do a little bit of road mapping and think through the options and think through what would have to happen in order to drive from the UK, where I'm based, to southern Germany. So you can see I'm based outside of London in Buckinghamshire, the southeast of the UK, and then the holiday destination, Lake Tegernsee, is close to the Austrian border. So the first decision for me would be, how do I get across from the UK to France? Should we take the ferry or should we take the train, the shuttle? And then should we drive via Brussels or Reims and Strasbourg? What's the best route choice? It's also quite a long journey, as you can see, so maybe it makes sense to break it up. Maybe it makes sense to consider booking a hotel, staying overnight. But even if we decide against that, it probably is useful to think about longer stops to recharge or refuel the car. So, as I said, I found a little bit of pre-planning, a little bit of thinking through the different options is very useful before we set off on a family trip, on a family road trip. And of course, things might change, right? There might be an accident, there might be traffic jams, roads might be flooded, all things I've experienced over the years driving to southern Germany. And I would suggest that we do the same thing for our products, for our digital products, that we do a little bit of product road mapping. Now, if we want to create a product roadmap, then what is this thing? What's a product roadmap? Now, in my mind, a product roadmap is an actionable plan that tells us how a product is likely to evolve over the coming months and which specific value it's going to create. So what are the specific benefits that it will deliver? And one of the benefits of using a product roadmap for me is that it offers a continuity of purpose, particularly if you're used to an agile, scrum-based, iterative way of working. There's, maybe you may be used to thinking primarily from sprint to sprint, or maybe you're thinking from 2 months to 2 months, or 6 weeks to 6 weeks, if you set something like a product goal. But I find it can be very useful to look at a longer time frame of 6, 9, or 12 months, and again, just get a rough understanding of how your product might evolve, and what different major releases or product versions you might be able to offer. And finally, a final benefit is that I find product roadmaps can be very useful to facilitate stakeholder expectations, set those expectations, and also engage the stakeholders, and have a conversation about what you want to do with your product. So ideally, a product roadmap then becomes a shared strategic plan. Now, that sounds all good, and as you can tell, in principle, in general, I find product roadmaps useful tools. But some of you might think, well, hold on a second, isn't a product roadmap a plan that pretty much prescribes what the functionality a product will deliver and how a product will develop? And that's true if we use a traditional product road mapping approach and traditional product roadmaps. So I would say if you use a traditional feature-based roadmap like this one, then that's probably not suitable if you are in an environment where there's uncertainty, change, and innovation, if you want to be agile. So this is a picture I took from Google Images, the source. You can see here at the bottom, it's one of the first pictures that shows up when you go to Google Images and you enter product roadmap. It's a beautifully visualized plan, I find. The original version even has colors. But when you take a look at the information that it contains, it says things like single sign-on or search improvements or Facebook integration. Now, those are all features. Those are all pieces of functionality. And it's kind of nice to see, oh, yeah, we want to improve search, but it doesn't communicate why. It doesn't communicate the benefit. It doesn't communicate the positive impact that we'd like to make by enhancing this feature. So again, this is a feature-based product roadmap, and this is the traditional road mapping approach where you essentially think about a list of functionality, a list of features, and you map it onto a timeline. And my experience suggests, and I would say that this is not really compatible with an agile way of working. So if you want to use roadmaps in an agile setting, don't use feature-based ones. Now, if in principle product roadmaps can be useful, but feature-based traditional ones aren't helpful, well, what kind of product roadmaps can we use then? So my suggestion is that effective product roadmaps, particularly roadmaps that are effective in an agile environment, should fulfill 4 qualities. And these are the qualities I'd then like to discuss with you in a little bit more detail. The first one is they should be outcome-based. They shouldn't primarily talk about features and functionality and outputs and deliverables, but they should primarily talk about the benefits, the impact we want to create with our products. They should be connected. So a product roadmap shouldn't be an isolated plan, but it should be clear how it relates to the product backlog, maybe an overarching vision or product strategy too. The third thing is it should be shared. It shouldn't just be a plan that is dictated by the stakeholders, or it is a plan that our product owner creates and says that's it. But there should be some agreement, there should be some buy-in and some consensus. And finally, a product roadmap should be regularly inspected and adapted, so it shouldn't be fixed. So, starting with outcome-based product roadmaps, and in order to illustrate what an outcome-based product roadmap can look like and make the conversation a little bit more concrete, I'm showing you a template that I created a number of years ago. Maybe some of you have seen this before. It's called the GO product roadmap. GO stands for goal-oriented. So I use outcome-based and goal-oriented as interchangeable, as synonymous. The central idea I would suggest with any outcome-based goal-oriented roadmap is that they are first and foremost based on goals. The plan is based on a goal or an outcome. So that's here right at the heart of this structure. So it's about the benefit we want to create, as I've already mentioned. It's about the reason why we want to invest time, money, and energy in progressing the product. And that might be to acquire more users, it might be to increase engagement, it might be to increase conversion, it might be to reduce churn, it might be to reduce technical debt and accelerate development. So those would all be sample goals, sample outcomes, and you can think about those sample goals and outcomes as product goals. So if you're used to Scrum and you use product goals in Scrum, then you'd anticipate here not only the very next product goal, but maybe the goals for the next 6, 9, or 12 months. And I typically start with goals and outcomes when I build an outcome-based goal-oriented product roadmap. So outcomes truly should come first. But you can see there are other pieces of information on there. There's date or temporal information right at the top. And if you should put dates on product roadmaps or not, well, that's been a topic of some great debate in product management for a number of years. There's some people who say, like, you must not use any dates on your product roadmaps, and there are people who say, like, well, maybe you should. So I think it all depends on who the audience of the product roadmap is. So if you create an external or externally visible product roadmap that your customers, your users see, then I would recommend not using any dates on your roadmap, but just very big, vague timeframes, like now, next, later, something Jana Bastow suggested, a colleague of mine a number of years ago. You just say in the first half of 2025 and the second half of 2025. However, if the product roadmap has an internal focus and it's there to align the work of the development teams and stakeholders, personally, I find it useful to use specific timeframes, maybe something like Q4 in 2024 or Q1 in 2025, or even specific dates. And the reason is that ideally, we'd like to fully meet all goals on time and on budget. But as I'm sure that many of you have experienced, it's not always possible. So in order to be able to make a trade-off decision and maximize value creation, well, we've got to think a little bit about when we might be able or should be able to meet a goal. So yeah, for external roadmaps, don't use any dates. For internal roadmaps, consider using dates or specific timeframes. What else is on there? Metrics at the bottom in order to make sure that the goals are specific enough, that they're ideally measurable. So it's great to have a big, overarching, coarse-grained, inspirational vision. But I think when we talk about product goals, or certainly when we talk about outcomes on a product roadmap, it makes sense to have the goals specific enough so we can clearly tell if they've been met or not. And that's why I like to add metrics or success criteria measurements to my product roadmaps. By the way, I'll show you an example of how you might apply this template shortly. I'll just quickly finish taking you through the structure. And then there's still features here, as you can see, on this template. However, the three things I'd like to say. First of all, any feature that you put on an outcome-based, goal-oriented roadmap must help you meet a goal. So if the sales rep comes to you or an important stakeholder comes to you or the CEO of the company comes to you and says, I've just spoken to our most important customer and they'll buy so many new subscriptions and make us all very rich if only you put this feature on your product roadmap, then take a look at your plan and see if there's a goal that this feature would support. Now, if this goal doesn't exist, you've got two choices. You can either amend the product roadmap and change an existing goal or introduce a new one, or you reject the feature request, assuming, of course, you've got the right level of empowerment. But resist the temptation to squeeze a feature onto a goal-oriented, outcome-based product roadmap. Again, the outcomes have to come first, and the features are there just to give everybody a rough understanding what might be required, what kind of output and deliverables might be required in order to realize the outcome. The other thing I'd like to say is that any features you put on a goal-oriented, outcome-based roadmap should be really big and coarse-grained. No epics, no user stories, no details. They'll eventually emerge in the product backlog at a later stage. So you don't want to solutionize here. You don't want to kind of fall back into traditional feature-based planning habits and decide at a very early stage when often you don't have enough information available what your product should look like and do in detail. Yeah. And third, don't add more than 3 to 5 features to your goal here or to a goal with a preference on the smaller number. Again, this is not a placeholder for product backlog. This is a strategic high-level plan, your product roadmap. So minimize any overlap with the product backlog. And then the final thing is very unexciting. If meeting the goal results in a major release or new product version, think about something like, what is it, iOS 18? Is it 18 soon? Yeah, thank you. I've lost track. Or Android or whatever operating system you use on your phones. Then yeah, you can state it here. Now, if you like this template, you can download it for free from our website. It comes with a handy checklist that helps you apply the template. If you don't like it, that's great. It's no problem. So the whole point was really just to draw your attention to that goals are A, central, and B, what a goal-oriented, outcome-based roadmap can look like. Having said that, there's an example I'd like to briefly discuss with you. Now, this is a made-up product. It's a healthy eating product, so the vision might be help people eat more healthily. The target group might be middle-aged men like myself, and the benefit might be to reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. I'm also assuming that this is a new product development effort, so it's a brand new application, a brand new app that we're developing here. Now, assuming sort of that's the context, then I'd start, as I mentioned earlier, by identifying the goals. And I then look at the needs statement, I'd look at the user problem that I'd like to address, and I'd look at the business goals that I'd like to achieve, and I'd think, well, what would be a first step towards meeting those overarching needs and those overarching business goals? And I thought a first step to help people reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes might be to help the users understand their eating habits, and at the same time acquire an initial user base. And a second step might be to help users improve their eating habits and grow the user base, and then help the users get fitter and generate a revenue through subscriptions, hoping that enough people will then upgrade to essentially a paid version of the app. And finally, retain users and help them meet their personal fitness targets. So I identify the goals, the outcomes first, and then I sequence them in such a way that they build on each other and that hopefully a meaningful narrative emerges. And then the next thing I like to do is think about time frames. And you can see I've opted here for quarters. And generally speaking, when you work with outcomes, when you work with product goals, I find it quite helpful to size them so that they fit into a 2 to 3 months period. So that's usually what works in my experience quite well. Generally, I say they should be at least somewhere around. It should usually take at least 6 weeks to meet such a goal, and don't make them bigger than about 4 months. Otherwise, they'll get so big that it can be hard to track progress towards them. So 2 to 3 months tend to work quite well. What else do we have on here? Oops, sorry, that was the wrong button. That was too much. We've got some names here. So the first version will be the MVP, the minimum viable product, and then version 2, 3, and 4, very boring names. And then we've got here, maybe that's slightly more interesting, some sample features. And maybe if I draw your attention to the features of the first goal, you can see they're really, really big. Healthy eating dashboard, that's the first one, right? And then integration with smartwatches and fitness devices. So again, important for me to point out, healthy eating dashboard does not communicate what that dashboard should look like. It doesn't say what it should do. It doesn't tell us anything about the specific information that should be displayed. Why not? Well, that's something we'd like to then figure out as we start working on that goal and building the first version of our product. And we'd like to do that by running an iterative, maybe Scrum-based process, by running, involving users and maybe demoing early product increments to them, or doing user tests using those product increments. So again, don't make the mistake of solutionizing at an early stage. Don't make the mistake of constraining the creativity of your development teams, assuming if you're in a product manager, product owner position at a too early stage. And then finally, there are some metrics here. Well, most of those metrics are placeholders, but and need to be refined and instantiated. But the metric of relating to the first goal is probably okay, be in the top 15 diabetes apps 6 weeks after launch. Now, there are quite a few things that we could improve on this roadmap, but generally speaking, a roadmap like this would probably be good enough, in my opinion, to make a go or no-go decision and decide now, okay, do we want to commit time, money, and energy implementing a product that would is likely to offer these kinds of benefits, or do we say as a business, nah, it's probably not worthwhile for us, it's probably not a smart move, it's not the right decision. So that's an outcome-based product roadmap, or one way how you can build an outcome-based product roadmap. What about the other 3 qualities? Well, the next one is that your product roadmap should not be an isolated plan, but that it should be connected to other product management artifacts. In order to illustrate how you can do that, I am using another little tool I've developed, a strategy framework. And here is our product roadmap. It talks about the specific outcomes that we want to achieve and the number of pieces of information it may contain, which we've already covered. Now, maybe it makes sense to first look to the left, look upstream, and think about how does a product roadmap relate to something like an overarching, inspiring product vision. And the vision is here. So vision for me describes the purpose that a product offers, the ultimate reason for creating it. So the vision I mentioned earlier was healthy eating, or helping people eat more healthily. So that might be a nice overarching, hopefully somewhat inspiring vision, at least for the people who work on the product. So that people don't have to be pushed, I think, as Steve Jobs put it once, but if they buy into the vision, then the vision pulls them along. But in order then to connect the vision to the product roadmap, I like to take an intermediate step and formulate a product strategy. Now, what is a product strategy? A product strategy, for me, tells us what the approach is that we choose in order to make progress towards the vision, but also how we want to make the product or keep the product successful. And there are 4 elements that I like to capture in a product strategy. The needs, the user customer needs that we want to address, like reducing the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, for instance. Then who are the users? Who are the customers? Well, middle-aged men like myself, maybe people who live in a specific geography, maybe people who have specific attributes. Business goals, what are the business goals that we want to achieve? It could be about opening up a new revenue source. It could be about developing the brand. It could be about reducing costs. It could be about achieving a certain profit margin, depending on what kind of product it is and where the product is in its life cycle. But I think it's very worthwhile to think about what the positive impact is that the product should create towards the users and the customers, towards the market, so to speak, even if it's an internal product. And again, what's the positive impact that the product should make on the business? I mean, at the end of the day, a product is just a value-creating vehicle, right? It exists to create value for users, customers, and the business. So it's important, I think, to make that clear here. And the other thing that's important to make clear is to ensure that the product strategy has been sufficiently validated. That is, that it's not just based on speculation, gut feeling, what the big boss says, past experience, but that you've systematically looked at the needs, you've looked at your description of the users and customers, and so forth. And I've missed out on something, but I'll come back to that in a second. Sorry. And you've gone through it systematically, and you think about, are there any risks? Are there any assumptions associated with those statements? And do we have empirical evidence to show that these statements are likely to be correct, that our approach to realize the vision and achieve product success is likely to work out? That's, of course, not a guarantee. But I think one thing is to clearly articulate a strategy. That tends to be really helpful. So, you can look at it together, you can visualize the information. But the other thing is then to do that risk assessment and say, like, okay, do we have data that backs up our statements? Are there any risks? Is there uncertainty? And then maybe carry out some customer interviews, maybe create some spikes, depending on which risks you want to address. If it's more a risk around, have we chosen the right target group? Or is it the right need? Is the need compelling enough? Maybe it's then a customer interview. If it's more around a technical risk, then it's probably more a spike that you want to carry out or implement. So there are a couple of things I've missed out on. One is standout features. That's sort of the 4th element that I like to capture in a product strategy. And that's particularly helpful for commercial revenue-generating products. So that a standout feature is a capability that sets your product apart from competing offerings and creates an incentive for people to choose it over alternatives. And then if you're not sure how to capture your vision and strategy, there's another little template that you can use, the product vision board. Some of you might have used it. Again, if you're interested, you can download it from my website. So a validated product strategy for me forms the foundation for building an actionable, realistic product roadmap. And when I work with clients and clients tell me about challenges they have with their product roadmaps, then often one of the reasons, at least, why there are challenges and issues with the product roadmap is that there is no clear product strategy, or that strategy hasn't been sufficiently validated. So it's just not a valid strategy. Somebody, maybe the big boss, maybe the CEO, has a vision, but that strategy is missing. So make sure, I would suggest that before you build a product roadmap, you think about who are the customers and users, why would people want to use the product, why should the business invest in it, and if it's helpful, what are the standout features of the product, and then use that to build your roadmap. The way I do this is that I like to try and derive the product goals, the outcomes on the roadmap directly from the needs and business goals. Yeah. So that your goals, your outcomes on the roadmap become steps towards meeting the needs and business goals you've stated in your strategy. So that's sort of the connection to the upstream plans. What about the product backlog? So the product backlog for me captures the outstanding work that's necessary to meet the next product goal or meet the product goal. Now, if we assume that the outcomes that we've captured on the product roadmap are product goals, then we can simply take the next product goal from the product roadmap and copy it across into our product backlog. What it does is it creates a focused, concise product backlog, and that's something I find really valuable. Many teams I've worked with over the years use product backlogs that were way too big, way too unfocused, had way too many items in it. And if we now use a product goal, and if that product goal is sufficiently specific, maybe even measurable, well, we can use that then to tell what items should be in the product backlog and which ones shouldn't. You know? You just have to be brave. You know, once you copy your product goal across into the product backlog, you then should remove, you should delete or archive any items that are in the product backlog that don't help you meet this goal, right? And then if you have some high-level features on your product roadmap, you can copy them across, start breaking them down into epics, add additional features, large pieces of functionality, then prioritize your product backlog and start refining the high-priority items to get it ready for the first or the next sprint. Yeah. So what that does is, again, it creates a very concise product backlog. The drawback now is you need to restock your product backlog every so often. So if your goals are quarterly goals on your product roadmap, you end up with a quarterly backlog, I don't know, refilling process. Yeah, quarterly, you restock your product backlog on a quarterly basis. Personally, I'd say for as long as your product changes, as long as there's uncertainty and innovation, it's worth doing. For me, it's worth working with a long, overly complicated product backlog than cleaning out your product backlog on a regular basis. Now, if you set this, if you play this well, your product backlog items should be connected to your vision, which I think is a nice thing, because it's not always been the case when I've worked with teams in the past that they could actually say or tell if any of their product backlog items had a positive impact on realizing the overarching vision. So that's connected and outcome-based. What about the third quality, and that is shared? So it's nice to have a product roadmap available, I think. It's nice to have an outcome-based and connected product roadmap available, but if it's just the plan of, say, the product owner or product manager, then and the stakeholders don't understand it, don't support it, if the development teams don't understand it or support it, it's pretty useless, right? So how can we make sure that the product roadmap is shared, that people understand it, that people support it, that people buy into it? Well, the traditional way, I guess, of achieving this is to create a draft product roadmap and then go from stakeholder to stakeholder, go from developer to developer, development team to development team, and ask people for their feedback, right? And try and work it in as much as possible, and then do the next round, and maybe then do a subsequent round. The alternative, which I prefer, is to bring the right people together in form of a collaborative workshop and co-create the product roadmap. So who are the right people? Well, it's the person in charge of the product manager or product owner. And then development team members, depending on the size of the development team and how many development teams you use, you may want to use representatives. If you work with representatives, it might be useful to have a UX designer, assuming it's an end-user facing product, an architect programmer, and somebody who knows about testing. So you have the main functions or the main perspectives here present. But that's not enough. I would also suggest that you involve the key stakeholders. So who are the key stakeholders? Well, the key stakeholders are those individuals who have taken interest in your product and whose expertise, help and support you need in order to successfully progress it. So for a commercial revenue generating product, that might be somebody from marketing, a marketeer, it might be a sales rep, a customer support team member, and then depending on the organization and product, it might also be somebody from finance or legal quality. So for instance, if you're in healthcare. So in order to understand who your key stakeholders are, I recommend carrying out a stakeholder analysis using a tool like the Power Interest Grid, for instance, so that you figure out these are the people who should really be involved in this workshop, because obviously the more people, or once you go above a certain size, it's going to be very hard to co-create the roadmap together in a workshop. So only involve those stakeholders whose expertise you need and who you need to help you make the right road mapping decisions. Now, I don't know what your experience is, but some of those stakeholders might be senior, some of those stakeholders might be very opinionated, some of those stakeholders might think that, as they're involved now in this workshop, they should clearly decide what information is put on the product roadmap. So co-creation can be challenging at times, and in order to guide people through this workshop and help people reach agreement, I find it helpful to involve a coach, an Agile coach, a Scrum Master, or another qualified facilitator. So the idea is, as I said, that the coach facilitates, maybe suggests ground rules, maybe also reminds people of those ground rules if that's necessary, ensures that everybody is heard and nobody dominates. So there are two key, I guess, mistakes you'd like to avoid, I would suggest. The first one is HIPPO, that the highest paid person opinion wins. And the most senior stakeholder in the room says, and these are the goals, and particularly these are my features, put them on there. Oh, great, we're done. Right, I'm off to the next important meeting. And the second mistake is design by committee. I think there's a saying that says, a camel is a horse designed by committee. It's a little bit unkind to the camels, but you get the picture. So the idea is that you avoid making weak compromises, that you avoid striking a deal that kind of doesn't really help anybody, and particularly doesn't move your product forward in an effective manner. So from a product perspective, you need to create a balance between making the right decisions that maximize value and securing buy-in. But I think you shouldn't jeopardize or threaten value creation in order just to secure buy-in. So yeah, coach can help you with this. Maybe can help you guide the group of people here through a collaborative decision-making process and choose the right decision rule. By the way, I find that consent tends to be a good decision rule for road mapping decisions. Consent means that nobody has any meaningful objections, right? Everybody's okay with the plan. Everybody's okay with the product roadmap. So you don't necessarily need unanimous agreement, but I think it'd be nice if you could secure consent. But if that's not possible, you try hard, but it's not possible to reach agreement, then the person in charge of the product manager or Scrum product owner should be empowered to have the final say. So you avoid being stuck in a situation where people just argue endlessly. So yeah, that's my suggestion. Maybe something to try out for some of you, that you organize a collaborative workshop, be it on-site or online, and then try and involve the right people and co-create an outcome-based, goal-oriented product roadmap. And then the final quality that I'd like to share with you is that your product roadmap is not seen as a fixed, static plan that is set in concrete. So we do our strategy, we do our roadmap, that's it. All we got to do now for the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months is execute, right? And of course, we'll execute flawlessly, but rather that your product roadmap is based on what we know at a given point in time. But the world doesn't stand still, of course. Technologies change, user expectations change, new trends emerge. So it's important to be aware of it and ensure that your product roadmap is always valid, in the sense that it's a forward-looking plan that's up to date and helps you move in the right direction, progress your product effectively, and really create the desired value. In order to do that, I suggest that you establish a strategic inspect and adapt cycle. So you're familiar, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Scrum inspect and adapt cycle that tends to happen on a fortnightly, 2-weekly basis. And if you now have a product roadmap, equally, if you work with a product strategy, you need to establish a strategic inspect and adapt cycle and review regularly the product roadmap. How often you should do that? Well, that depends on two main factors: how changeable your product is and how dynamic the market is. So if your product is say, a very young product, and maybe you've used some new innovative technologies, some AI tools or technologies come to mind, and yeah, it's a very dynamic market, you may want to review your roadmap on a monthly basis. If you have a little bit more stability, then do it on a quarterly basis. And if you have a very mature product in a well-protected market with a few main players, you might get away with reviewing your product roadmap every 4 to 6 months. Yeah. In order to have effective reviews, bring together the people who helped you create the product roadmap, so the development team representatives and the key stakeholders. Look at the progress you've made, look at the trends that you see, look at any changes in your product strategy, and then decide if and how you should adapt your plan. Yeah? Again, the whole point of making strategic decisions, working with an artifact like a product roadmap, is to be proactive, to avoid nasty surprises. So again, encouragement to regularly review, regularly inspect and adapt the roadmap. And that's basically everything I wanted to share with you. So this is a quick summary slide. For me, product roadmaps are helpful product management tools, also in an agile setting, if we apply them correctly, if we choose the right road mapping approach and the right roadmap format. So again, as I've suggested, think about using outcome-based roadmaps that are connected to the product backlog, but maybe also to a vision and strategy in an effective way. Update them regularly, and do involve development team members and stakeholders in creating and updating them. Just to remind you, as much as I think we should aim to make consensus-based decision and reach agreement, reach consent, particularly when it comes to product roadmaps. If that's impossible, it's important to ensure that the person in charge of the product can make a decision to move forward and continue to progress the product. So thank you very much for your attention. I think we've got a little bit time for questions. Lovely. If you'd like to hear more about my thoughts on product roadmaps, then go to my website. Some of you might also find it helpful to look at a book, at one of my books, my book Strategize, which is shown here, which talks more about product road mapping practices in detail. So thank you very much.
So do we have some questions for our speaker? Jason's got a microphone over here. I've got a microphone here. Somebody on this side.
So thanks for the presentation, Roman. It was very good. In terms of the adaptive slide, so what if it's not a product, similar to your example on the healthy approach, yeah? So it's a goal that we want to achieve, and it needs this roadmap to achieve there, and it's not a product. So when it comes to adaptive approach and the review, does that matrix still apply on it?
So you want to check if you're on track to meet a goal, or if you've met a goal?
If we are on track, let's
say.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So if you want to check if you're on track to meet a goal that you've put on your product roadmap that you're working towards, I would suggest you use a tool such as a burn down chart, or depending on what process you use. I think in Kanban there's the cumulative workflow diagram. Is that the correct term, right? So that's what you might want to use in Kanban. And then in addition to that, you should check that you actually have met your goal. But sometimes you release a new product version, or a new major release. Well, you deploy a new major release of your product, and then it can take a few days, maybe a week, maybe a couple of weeks, until you know if you've met your goal. If enough people use it, if you've started to generate enough interaction, if engagement is up, for instance. Yeah.
Thank you. Let me note before the next question here. If you want to get started on the coffee break, you don't have to sneak out. You can just go. But those of you who want to stay for questions, please do stay and we'll give you the microphone.
So I happen to be a product owner for a Scrum training company, which means that only parts of our product are actually software that we're building. So what strategies would you recommend if you want to create such a roadmap for a service-oriented business?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. Thank you for asking it, Andy. Maybe I'll just give people a chance to move out.
I think the question was bad.
No, that's all right. No, I think it's a good question. The attraction of the coffee. So what if we have an asset that isn't maybe just a product, maybe there's more to it, maybe there's a service that's connected to it, or maybe we're not even quite sure if it's a single product. Maybe it's a composite product. So if you look at many online businesses or websites of online businesses or many online marketplaces, online websites of online retailers, say Amazon, for instance, just to name a well-known one, you're probably looking at an asset that is not a singular product, but more like a composite product or an aggregate product that is combined of several products. So I think that'd be my first step to check what are we dealing with. Is it a single entity or is it really a composite entity? Because if it's a composite entity, if it's a product that's made out of several sub-products, you may need two roadmaps and two different types of roadmaps. You may need roadmaps for the individual products, and then you may need a portfolio product, a portfolio roadmap for the overarching product. Yeah. Similarly, if you have a service product system, a combination of a service and a product, you may need a roadmap for your service, and you may benefit from having a separate roadmap for your product, and then possibly an overarching roadmap. So always check how many assets you're dealing with, which of those assets are products. And if it's a product, in the sense that it's an entity that creates value for a group of people and the business on its own, and you can clearly articulate that value and you can measure that value, it's likely to be a product. Such an entity then deserves a product backlog, it then deserves a roadmap, and in my mind also a strategy. So, yeah. Sorry, things can get complicated quite quickly.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. I got some insights. And I do have a follow-up question concerning service-oriented or IT services. So my team that I do have, they are struggling quite a lot with roadmap. They have adapted only the epics shown in a Jira roadmap, and there were no stories in that, and there's not shown what's the value for the customer. And my question is, you presented that the value for the customer should be presented in the roadmap. How do you do that with Jira? Because there's normally the feature and the epic and the story predefined.
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. So thank you for your question. I'm not a Jira expert, nor a big Jira fan, to be honest. But then again, I might just lack the experience and the knowledge. If you work with a team and that team currently is focused on implementing epics and user stories, I'd suggest having a session with the team, a workshop where you ask, why are we building those epics and user stories? Why are we implementing them? What is the impact that we want to create? What is the benefit or the benefits that we want to achieve? And more specifically, what's the benefit that we want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 months? Because that makes the conversation concrete and say, like, okay, what's the impact? What's the user-facing impact? And then is there a business-facing impact that we can associate with it? So I didn't talk about it in greater detail, but maybe I can go back, but these slides are animated, so it's going to be a little bit painful maybe. If you look at this slide here, what I've tried to do is I've tried to formulate the outcomes so that there's an user-facing and a business-facing part. It's not something I started out with when I began using goal-oriented roadmaps. So I was focusing more on the business goals, and you don't necessarily have to use these compound goals, but I think they quite nicely recognize that, as I said earlier, a product is a value-creating entity, and there has to be a positive impact on the users and the business. I mean, otherwise it'll be unsustainable to offer this product. So yeah, that's what I would suggest. Start with a single product goal, a single outcome, and see how that goes. Equally, if you're thinking about introducing outcome-based product roadmaps, sometimes just building a whole product roadmap is just a little bit too daunting. It's too challenging for various reasons. People might lack the knowledge. Stakeholders may not trust the new approach, and then start with a single goal. Those of you who use OKRs, by the way, going back to this slide here, you can use an OKR-based approach to help you with outcome-based roadmaps. Does anybody see any correlation between objectives and key results and a structure like this? Yeah. Yeah. So I'd say my mapping, but I'm not an OKR expert, is that the goal is like the objective. And then you can say, well, the dates, the metrics, and maybe also the features, they can be key results. So you've got one objective and you've got 3 key results. That sounds about right then. Yeah. So again, if your stakeholders, for instance, or your teams are used to working with OKRs, then you can leverage that to, as I said, introduce goal-oriented outcome-based roadmaps.
All right, let's finish up with one more question, and I think we'll be good. Yeah?
So, here was a question? At the front, right at the front?
I'm on my way.
Final one, maybe before the coffee. So you mentioned the strategy and the vision to the product level. So do we need to relate that to the overall vision of the organization or the company? And if we do, how we can do that?
So yeah, no, that's a great question. So I like to distinguish between product vision and a company vision. So company vision is the aspiration that the business has, the overall aspiration. What's a good company vision? What was the Google vision about information? But I can't think of it right now. Sorry, put it. That's the thing you want. Wasn't that Apple or? But anyway, yeah. Or Oxfam's vision. Organize. Thank you. Organize the world's information. Thank you. Yeah. Or Oxfam charity. I think the company vision is to end hunger. So generally speaking, I think a vision can be huge. It can be big. It can be an aspirational, or should be an aspirational goal. You may never fully reach it. That's okay. But your company may have a vision, and it may be helpful to choose a different vision for your product, particularly if you work in a larger enterprise, and particularly if that enterprise offers different products, maybe even different portfolios. Yeah. So in that case, then your product vision will be distinct from your company vision. However, if you work for a small business, if you work, say, for a startup or a young business, and the business only, the company only has 1 or 2 products, often it then makes sense to inherit the company vision and just reuse the company vision as your product vision. Yeah. Equally, just to make this a little bit more complicated, if your product is part of a product family, like Microsoft Office. So if I was in charge of Microsoft Office, I would encourage the product owners, product managers of Word, PowerPoint, and Excel to reuse the vision of the Office suite. Because I think they're all productivity tools, they're all fairly closely related, they're all bundled, so they're licensed together, they're sold together. So in that case, again, if you have products that form a cluster, a bundle, it can make sense to share a vision. Yeah. But again, the idea with a vision is to offer motivation. We heard about intrinsic motivation earlier today, so that there's a reason for people to work on the product. There's a pull that the product that you create above and beyond that. Yeah, we need to go to work and earn some money and pay the bills. Yeah, but this is the good that we want to do with our product in the world, and hence avoid that the vision says, we want to be number 1 in this marketplace. That's not a good vision. That's a vague business goal that probably needs to be refined. The vision should always be about positive impact like healthy eating or end hunger or organize the world's information.